Hi, everyone. My name is Becky Robinson, and I'm so glad that you decided to join us for today's conversation. As you're coming into Zoom, we hope you'll take a moment to find the chat, where we hope to have some lively dialogue with you throughout today's event. So if you could take a moment and locate the chat, as I tell you every time, we invite you and encourage you to please use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see you. And we would love to hear from you as you're coming in, where you're calling in from today. Bonnie and I were talking before the broadcast began about the fact that some people are still living in states or countries where there aren't any stay-at-home orders. If you happen to be in a place where you have not been asked to stay at home, we'd be curious to hear about that. And we love seeing all of you coming out. So welcome in Toronto and Texas and Alaska and Georgia and Iowa.
South Africa.
Yes, amazing. South Carolina. So one more question for all of you as you're coming in. We have been doing a daily prompt as part of our daily series, and we've been asking people to start each event with a very positive outlook and offering up something about which you're grateful. So if you would be willing to share with us today in the chat and tell us something that you're grateful for today. I am grateful that my house is quiet and that I have this chance to speak with Bonnie. Bonnie, do you have anything you'd like to share today?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this discussion with all of you today and to connect with all of you from all over. I mean, it's wonderful to see where everybody is coming in from.
We're definitely grateful to have you all here, and throughout the event we will be asking some different questions, so we hope you'll continue to put your thoughts into the chat. And we are recording today's session, so if you have a friend or colleague who could benefit from today's content, we hope that you will share it with others. And we do have a few slides. If you received those slides in an email from me this morning and had the chance to look at them, will you go ahead and let us know that in the chat as well? We will be referencing those materials in today's webinar, so if you have them open on your desktop, we will also have them available to you on the screen. So thanks to many of you who are sharing so many things about what you're grateful for. And
I have another thing I'm grateful for.
Oh, good. Tell me.
I'm grateful for Zoom.
Yes.
Because it's keeping me sane. Well, the best way to connect FaceTime and Zoom, you know, with my family and my friends and
your dance class.
And my clients, my dance class. Yes.
Yeah, Zoom is a pretty amazing technology, and we're glad for the ways that it has brought us
yay,
together.
There's somebody else. What would we do without it these days?
Yes. So before we dive in too far, I'm not sure if any of you have been a part of this series with Bonnie Marcus. It has been called the Women's Empowerment Series. However, today's session is really relevant for anyone, male or female. So hopefully we're getting a good mix. We wanted to make sure that everyone knew that they were welcome to all of these events. So for those of you who may not have met Bonnie before, Bonnie is based in California. She is an author and a coach, an executive coach and a speaker. And we have been learning so much together throughout this series. So if by some chance this is your first webinar in the series, we would welcome you to go back into the archives for additional learning from Bonnie. Okay, so let's dive in. This topic is exceedingly relevant today. We want to talk about strategic networking and specifically how we can adjust to be strategic about our networking in a virtual world. So Bonnie, let's start with some definitions. Can you share with us, when you say strategic network, what do you mean?
What I mean is that it's networking that's intentional and purposeful. We're often told that, you know, we should go out and make a lot of connections, and we should network with as many people as possible. And I think people go out and they're, oh my gosh, you know, I've got so many Facebook friends, I've got so many people on LinkedIn. But it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And it's putting on the strategic mindset that really starts with, what's your career goal? What are you hoping to accomplish? What's your goal for your business? What's your goal for your career? And then in a very intentional and strategic way, you say, okay, who do I know? And who do I need to know to help me reach whatever that goal is? So it's really focused. You know, I often talk about how a lot of people network like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. You know, we all think, well, the more we can brainstorm about ideas and stuff, you know, the better off we'll be. And so we throw a lot of things, a lot of our resources and our time and energy also at networking. But the way it can be very powerful and much more effective is if it's strategic and it's focused. And so, you know, that's really what we're going to focus on today, is what that looks like. Focusing your networking around a goal.
That's a really helpful distinction, Bonnie. And I realized that we had a poll. We wanted to find out how the folks on the call would describe their networking. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. I think I was supposed to do it before, but you know,
Okay.
having some definition probably helps. So for those of you who are able to see the poll, we invite you to weigh in on this question. What best describes your networking? Is it sporadic at best? Do you set aside dedicated time each week? Are you one of those people who doesn't network at all? Or do you know it's important, but you're not sure how to do it effectively? So we'll give you a few moments to comment on that. I think sporadic at best could be Bonnie's description of throwing spaghetti at a wall, right?
Yeah.
So anxious to see what you think. And if for some reason you're not able to see the poll today, we would invite you to go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat instead, and I can share that out with everyone. So I'm going to give you just a few more seconds on that poll. It looks like most of the people who have, it looks like a lot of people have already answered. So Bonnie, before I close the poll, I'm curious, do you have any predictions about which of those answers got the most responses?
Well, I would think that it would be between sporadic and I know it's important, but I don't know how to do it effectively.
Well, I think you nailed it, Bonnie. Look at that. So 44% of you said that your networking is sporadic at best, and 32% of you say you know it's important, but you're not sure how to do it effectively. I'm happy to see that only a very few people answered that they don't network at all.
I'm happy to see that 21% set aside dedicated time. Okay.
I know, that's amazing. For those people who answered that you set aside dedicated time, I'd be curious, tell me in the chat, how on earth do you do that? Do you block it off on your calendar? Do you have a specific day or time each week? Please tell us, we would love to hear.
Well, when I talk to my clients who say that they have no time to network, especially during the day, you know, at work, when we were all at work, I say, just put it on your calendar. So what you brought up, that point is exactly right. Just set aside some time, cross it off, and then you'll make a point of doing it and filling it in with, oh, I'll have coffee with Becky, or, you know, I'll have lunch that day with Kelly, whatever, you'll fill it in later, but put it on the calendar. I
Sure.
think
So,
it's probably even more difficult now, especially for those of you who are working at home. Maybe your spouse or your partner is working at home. You have kids that you have to homeschool. If you don't put it on your calendar and put some kind of structure to your day, then it's really not going to happen.
yeah, no kidding. So Larnell is telling us, and I'm not sure gender here, but Larnell is a member of a networking group that meets on Friday mornings each week. So that, you know, obviously happens every week. Allison says she has to schedule it in, but needs to be more focused. And when Patty says that when she sets those moments aside, that she makes them count. So lots of great ideas here. Wow. We could probably write a whole blog post with these suggestions. Pam says she focuses on 3 connections a week.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Larnell, thank you for clarifying. She's giving me a smile, so thank you, Larnell. All right, so strategic networking is really about being focused and having a plan. And what I'm curious about, Bonnie, is what is it, and I know we want to look at a few of the slides at this point. Some of you mentioned that you didn't receive them. We will resend them with our follow-up email, and we're going to share them with you now, so don't worry. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, what makes it so powerful. And I know you have some insights to help
Yeah.
us to be more strategic?
So when you start out with what you're hoping to accomplish, what your goal is, and that could be around your business, it could be around your career. The first question you need to ask yourself is, who do you know and who do you need to know? And some of those people, you know, you will immediately identify as decision makers and key stakeholders. In other words, these are the people who have power over your career trajectory. They're the decision makers. And so this is a slide from my book, The Politics of Promotion, that helps you to identify who these key people are. And those key decision makers would go right there in that middle box. But you would be missing out on a lot of networking opportunities if you didn't include all the people that are in their web of influence. So when you look at a decision maker, you need to look at who influences the decision maker. Who do they call on in meetings? Who do they hang out with at lunch and maybe, you know, after work? Who do they seem to turn to when they're looking to make a decision or getting some feedback? And then you put all those people in those different boxes, and you make a point of putting them in your network plan so that you can connect with them and learn more about them and gain visibility with them. So it's not just the key decision maker, it's all the influencers as well.
So that's really helpful. So how do you recommend that someone use this? Would you use it for each person that you want to connect with and then fill in the outer circle?
Not necessarily each person that you want to connect with, but the key decision makers.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
And if we could pull up the other slide about that has the network plan, I can show you how that would all fit together. So this is what I consider to be your mini sales plan. And in this outlines your entire network. And what you would do is, again, going back to what your goal is, who do you know and who do you need to know? You start to fill in the people here in your first column of people that you think you should, it's strategically important that you include in your plan. And then, like you would a sales plan, you rank them and decide, well, who has the most power and influence here? And they would be like an A account, a B account, a C account if this were a sales plan. And then you go to the third column and you say, well, how well do I know them? How strong is my connection? So what you end up with is a very obvious way to target your time and energy and prioritize. You look at, say, the first name is, oh, Becky Robinson. Well, is she a key stakeholder? Yeah, she's an A. And when I look at the connection, I don't really know that person. You know, I need somebody else to perhaps introduce me or open up the door, but I need to figure out a way to get more credibility and visibility. So it becomes immediately apparent as you're using this, where you need to focus your time and energy.
So that's
And
really, yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah. And so this becomes your network plan. It's constantly changing as you develop relationships over time. It's very, very static, and it keeps you focused. But getting back to what makes the strategic network so powerful and so effective, it's this kind of focus.
Sure. So about how much time, if you wanted to have, you know, an optimal amount of time each week that you would focus on something like this worksheet and, you know, following up with certain people, is there an optimal amount of time, Bonnie, that you recommend, or a minimum amount of time?
You know, it really, I hesitate to say that, because then some people say, well, I don't have 3 hours a week to do this. You know, I think you need to make sure that networking is your priority. And if you can do it 3 hours one week and only 20 minutes the next week, so be it. But it should be in your priority. It should be on your list of things that you should be doing every week in some way.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, also as you were describing this, Bonnie, one thing that came to my mind is wondering about, is this more often or more typically, say I work in a large corporate environment, is this about within my own organization, or is this about outside my organization, and where is it best to focus energy?
Well, again, and that's a good question. I think you need to build your network both internally and externally. So if you are, say, ambitious and you're looking to advance your career, this power network sheet should definitely be focused on the people who have some influence over you getting ahead. And I think you can do a separate one for building your external network, which is also important. You always want to keep your external network alive. People who perhaps have been past colleagues or alumni from school or grad school or former bosses. And I just like to say, take a moment to say that, I'm very grateful for the successful career that I've had. But the point that I want to make to everybody listening is that every job, except for the first one, every job from entry level all the way up to the C-suite, all of those jobs came from my external network making referrals. So it's really powerful to keep both networks alive and keep them going in parallel. If say you're not getting ahead and you're thinking of looking outside of your company, you might move more to your external network and former colleagues and former managers, et cetera, who've moved on.
So it seems like there could be a delicate balance there. You may want to get ahead in your organization and so work on your network internally, but always keep those outside relationships thriving in the event that people can remember you when an opportunity comes along.
Right, right. And the other thing that is important to mention is that when we're networking, we tend to want to stay in our comfort zone and just network with people that we know and like. So for instance, somebody posted they have a networking meeting every week. I think that my coaching advice would be make sure that that's not the limit of your networking, that you're reaching out beyond that to people that you may not know. And Kelly, if you could bring up the open versus closed slide. Yeah. So I love this visual because it shows the difference between what I consider a very powerful network and one that would not be as effective for you. If you look at network B, it's highly closed. So you are reaching out to only people that you already know, and you have a lot of shared contacts within your own networks. So you're not really expanding your reach beyond the scope of the people that you already know and their networks, many of whom, those people you already know too. But if you look at the highly open one on the left, you can see that when you connect to somebody new, you have the opportunity then to be exposed to their entire network. And this is a great example to me of how LinkedIn works. Because when you connect to somebody new on LinkedIn, LinkedIn will come up and say, oh, well, now, do you know this person in their network? Do you know that person in their network? So now you have a much broader and expansive network that is a lot more diverse and can be much more powerful for you. So this is a good example of course, external networking and how it can work for you.
So Bonnie, it's so funny when you put this slide up, and of course I've seen it before, I saw it on the webinar, and I looked at it briefly. My mind immediately went to network B as being the more powerful network. But you know, once you explained it, it makes sense that it would be better to network with people who don't know each other and then expand exponentially the possibilities for yourself. So I'm curious for the people who are on the call, if you could take a moment in the chat and let us know which of these two feels more like the network that you currently have. And no judgment, just interesting to see, you know, do you have more of that closed network where you know people who know people and know each other, or do you have that truly open network? And maybe this isn't,
The point I want
yeah,
to
go
make,
ahead.
you can do both, and you should be doing both, because there are, you know, we definitely have more comfort reaching out to people we know, but the people we know can perhaps introduce us to people that we have identified in our network plan that maybe they can introduce us to or give us information, you know, more information about. So I'm not saying you have to do one versus the other, but I think the slide shows that you need to expand beyond your comfort level to people who you don't know, who can also provide good information for you, and vice versa.
Sure. So here's a question from Deborah. She's wondering why you see Network B as more likely for women and people of color.
That's actually based on research. And so, you know, I don't have, actually, on another slide, I do have the research that shows that. But women and people of color tend to, I think, stay more in their comfort zone and much more comfortable networking that way. And that's what the research was based on.
Got it. So another quick question while we're on this topic of open and closed networks. Gloria is wondering, so networking with individuals who are not in your career choice of employment, do you have any recommendations on how to do that? So, you know, if you're wanting to leap in your career to a new field and you only know people who are in your field, how can you network beyond the niche that you've previously worked in?
Well, you can identify people who are, you know, already in that kind of niche. You know, I think LinkedIn is really, really good for that, because you can join different groups depending on, I mean, say it's business development, or say it's marketing and sales, or, you know, you can certainly get to know people that way. And within your organization, your own organization, you know, look for people in different departments who may have the job or the title, the responsibilities that you're also looking for, and connect with them.
Sure, that's really helpful. So I think we're probably done with the slides for now.
Yeah.
Kelly, thanks. So we talked, Bonnie, a little bit about how strategic networking is different from traditional, you know, other networking. And I'm wondering if we can talk for a few minutes about how we can keep our networks alive and what it really takes to build those powerful relationships.
The best way to build strong relationships is to build mutually beneficial relationships, win-win relationships. You know, I think a lot of women that I've talked to, and I know this isn't, you know, our audience today isn't just women, but a lot of what I've heard is, you know, I feel awkward, you know, asking for something. I feel, you know, I'm much more likely to give and to offer to do things. And I think that's really the way a lot of relationships start, is that we find out what's important to other people. We get to know them by asking really good questions and what some of their challenges are. And we offer, you know, to help if we can. And when you're, you know, within the workplace itself, you use your value proposition to say, how can I serve others? How can I help my manager reach his or her objectives based on how I accomplish and get results? But that's the best way to do it. And it's not a transactional quid pro quo kind of thing where I do for you, so you better do for me. As you build these relationships over time, you get more comfortable with perhaps asking for something in return at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But the mentality isn't, okay, now I did that for that person, so now they're gonna, I'm immediately gonna ask for something in return. But the strongest relationships are the ones that are mutually beneficial. There's a story in the book about a client of mine who was one of the best networkers I've ever, people would reach out to her, even if it was dinner time, and she would take their call. And they would ask her a question, something about work or maybe a new job or something. And she would always take their call. And she really was building up a favor bank, if you want to look at it that way. But then there came a time where she really needed a job. She had left her banking position to go to a tech startup, and that only lasted about a year and a half. And then that fell apart. And there she was the breadwinner in her family, and she needed another job right away. And she reached out to her network, and she's in a senior leadership position. And she got another position at the same level within 90 days. The position wasn't even posted, but she did that because she had been so helpful to her network that they responded in kind.
Wow.
And so, there's a really good lesson there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't lead with what this person can necessarily do for you, but what you can do for them, and then it becomes mutual over time.
Yeah, that's a really powerful story, Bonnie. And I'm wondering, given the fact, oops, that's what happens when we all move home to work. So given the fact that many of us now don't have the opportunity to be in person together, to go out for coffees or dinners or lunches, what recommendations do you have about how to build strong relationships now that we're forced into these virtual environments and working remotely?
Well, if you are still working and you are on a lot of Zoom meetings, for instance, and many of us are, and some of you, I'm sure, like, you have one Zoom meeting after another. Take the opportunity when you're on those virtual meetings to take some notes about what some of your coworkers have said. Maybe it's a good point, a good idea that they brought up, or they asked a question that they put out there that wasn't answered. Or take the time to then reach out after that meeting and say, wow, that was a really great idea, or I really appreciated your opinion on this, just to start to build that relationship and that connection. And in general, I think that it's an opportunity for all of us to reach out and perhaps, send information or articles of people that to people that we already know or we're looking to build relationships with. I just saw this article about this particular product or service. I thought you might be interested. There are opportunities now virtually, because this is how we're all learning and growing and connecting. There's so many great webinars out there. There's so many great podcasts out there. People, I think, are reading books more than ever. To set up virtual book clubs, let's with some of your colleagues. I just read this book about working remotely and managing my team. Would you be interested? Let's read and let's talk about it after we read a couple of chapters or things like that. So being a resource, I think, and sharing information, and then finding a way to connect around that information through Zoom or FaceTime, I think, or through email, or the phone, is a great way to stay connection, to keep connections. I've been doing virtual happy hours, I gotta say. And so I go back to some of my colleagues and some of my friends that I haven't connected to in years. But here's the thing, because I do get asked this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How do I connect with somebody? I really need to. I mean, I think they're in a good company and I want to connect with them and I want to know more about their experience as a project manager or a COO or chief of staff or whatever. But I haven't connected with them in 5 years. One thing that this pandemic has taught us is that now we have this huge common experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of levels that playing field. It doesn't matter if, Becky, I haven't talked to you in 5 years. I can reach out and say, hey, we haven't connected, but how are you doing with all this? How's it going with homeschooling? How's it? And just start there and make that connection and then expand to more business information or whatever that you're looking for. So in a way, I think that because we have this all in common, that it's a great starting point to build a network now and to make connections, even if they're people we don't know or people we haven't connected with in a really long time.
Well, and to your point about the fact that we can grow our network stronger by seeking to be helpful first, I think there likely are a lot of people out there now who could use help or encouragement. Maybe they've been misplaced from a job because of this challenge, or they're really looking to use this time to learn something that can help them for what's next. So being awake to the way that we could add value and help at times like this can give us a reason to reach back out to people that we haven't been in contact with in a while.
Right. And I think that you can really show up as a leader by being a resource. So given the amount of time that you may or may not have, you could put together a virtual brown bag lunch, a lunch and learn,
Mm-hmm.
and invite other people to lead on specific topics that may be relevant to your team or to the people in your department. So if you I think we're going through a period of adjustment, and I'd be curious how everybody else on this call feels about it. But my first week was panic. Like I just felt totally cut off from the world, and I really couldn't even think about being strategic about my network and connecting, and and then I know, although my kids are grown, there's a whole panic about homeschooling and how do I fit all this in. So it's taken people a couple of weeks to kind of settle into whatever this new pattern is, this new lifestyle is. But now I think that you can structure your day. You can take more time to think strategically beyond your to-do list about how you're going to make these connections and how you're going to build these relationships over time. And it could be, set a little goal for yourself each week of what kind of time you can dedicate to this and who you can connect to. I mean, I love the person on the chat who said 3 people a week. I mean, whatever you can do, it's great.
Sure. Well, this might be a great time to pause and ask our attendees to weigh in. Bonnie referenced her own experience of, the first week being panic and, sort of starting to settle into a new normal and routine. And we would love to hear from you in the chat. How has it been for you during this crisis? Can you resonate with what Bonnie is saying about it being challenging at first and now being able to shift to think strategically? And while you do that, I do have a question that came in. GC is wondering how long we should wait between contacting someone if the first and second time there's no response. And I think along those lines, for those of us who may be using social networks like LinkedIn or Facebook to reach out to people that we want to get to know better, do you have, Bonnie, any best practices or tips for how to increase the likelihood of getting a response from someone potentially who you haven't met before?
Don't send them generic sales pitches. I don't know.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I don't know about any of you, but I am so tired of people who reach out just because they want to pitch something to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's not somebody who really wants to get to know me. It's somebody who is just looking at me as a prospect for something.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and I find this especially on LinkedIn. I don't necessarily find it on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. It's just try to customize, show that you are interested, look at their profile.
Mm-hmm.
You targeted them, you put them on your network plan for a reason. And so I think it's important to customize it and really state why you're interested in learning more about them. If somebody reaches out to me and they say, I've looked at your profile and I'm really interested in hearing more about how you managed your career, or how you became a speaker, or how you wrote, I'm going to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a personal connection, and I see that they have actually taken the time to look at my profile.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. And we have some comments coming in. Someone said, be authentic. And so the more authentic you can be, the more you can be open about why you're reaching out, the more likely that you'll get a favorable response. So there are a few comments from people to the question of, how are you adjusting? So Karen says that she's been working from home for the last 7 years, and the biggest challenge is having kids and husband at home. Jim says he's finding it easier to get in touch with folks. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Lisa, another Lisa, says difficulty having the family at home too, and sharing that the panic seems to come and go. Some days she feels grounded, and other days she can't figure out what to do. Emily says that she's been working from home for more than 10 years, so she's working on getting to that strategic thinking phase, but the working isn't all that different. Ron says it's been great for him. It's more structured and purposeful. And sad news here from Chris, who just graduated, had a job lined up, and now fell through because of hiring freeze. So not sure how to proceed with a job search during a time like this. So, that idea of job search is really closely tied to networking, Bonnie, because in your story about your client, you mentioned that her networking made it easier for her to find a job in a difficult
And
time.
from my experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, the client I mentioned, reached out to her network and told them that, she was looking for a job, and she was, she shared her story, and people responded. So in a time like this, and you're looking for a job, it just shows how important building this network is in a proactive way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't wait until you need a job. You don't wait until you were passed over for a promotion. You build this and you work on this consistently, so that you do have a group of people who know you and know your value and are there to support you. For that student, I would reach out to, I'm not sure what your network looks like, but if you could reach out to some of your some of your fellow students, some alums, some of the people that know you well from school, professors, etc. If you had any kind of summer jobs or internships, reach out to them. And it actually may be an opportunity to do some kind of an internship now that may end up moving into a full-time or a part-time position after this is all over. So look for all those opportunities, because internships sometimes do turn into employment.
That's really helpful, Bonnie. So I know one of the things that we wanted to circle back to if we had time was this idea of the excuses that we sometimes use for not networking. And I was thinking when you were talking about, being willing to reach outside our network, it reminded me of a story a few years ago. A mentor of mine locally decided that it would be great for me to meet some women who are part of financial services, something totally different than what I do. And we decided to meet for lunch. And I hardly ever leave the office. I hardly ever get out. And so it was a huge kind of step out of my comfort zone to go and network with these professional women that I had never met who were in a completely different field. So I show up at the restaurant. I'm sitting at the restaurant waiting for the women, looking at my watch, trying to figure out why they're late. Turns out I had the wrong restaurant. They called my cell phone and I had to get in my car and go to where they
I
were.
was going to say the wrong day.
Nope, right day, right time, wrong place.
Yeah,
Um,
the only thing that would apply to now is the wrong Zoom link because you don't have to worry about that.
yes,
Um,
indeed. So what are some reasons we give, not wanting to be embarrassed when we show up in the wrong Zoom link? What are some excuses that we use and how can you help us overcome them?
so common excuses, I don't have time. Yeah. And that's why when we talked earlier about putting aside some dedicated time on your calendar works because you honor it. It's on your calendar Thursday between 1 and 3 or 1 and 2. I'm going to focus on networking activity. And I find that that's helped my clients tremendously, mostly because and even now, I mean, we go from meeting to meeting. We're juggling so many things, and if we don't put it down, if we don't have it on our calendar, we're gonna find something else to do. Laundry, I don't know, something else. So the most common one I hear is I don't have time. Also, I just want to go home after work. And this is what seems like the good old days when we used to go to an office and there were networking activities outside of work or after work. And we, just wanted to go home and get into our sweats and pour a glass of wine. We really didn't want to have the energy to socialize. And so strategically thinking, I think you can, rather than go to a networking thing every single night, you can be very strategic and choose the ones that you feel would be most beneficial. And maybe that requires that you go to one meeting to evaluate it. You don't necessarily join, and then you find out, nah, that's not going to work for me. And then, you might choose another. But again, try to be strategic rather than throwing spaghetti against the wall kind of approach, and look at different networking events and activities. If you are going to a conference, which we hope we will be able to go to maybe in the fall, see if you can connect with some of the speakers or panelists ahead of time, other people if there's an attendee list, so that you can set aside time even before you get there for a coffee or some kind of a meeting, so that it doesn't seem completely overwhelming. You go into this networking thing and there are like 200 people there, and so one of the common things I also hear is that I'm an introvert, and I don't feel comfortable like going to large events, and again, we don't have to worry about it right now, but when things open up again, I think it's important to know that introverts can actually form the strongest relationships because they're very focused, they ask really good questions, they're really good listeners, and they're not like, going to the next person and all over the place. So I don't think that being an introvert is a really good excuse either. You can use the power of your being an introvert and make really great, strong quality relationships. And maybe another one is, not feeling comfortable meeting people or meeting new people.
Mhm.
And I think that I've seen people work different networking events where they are handing out, a million different business cards and working the room and don't necessarily have any strategy for it. And then there are people who will make, say, 4 really good connections at an event, and they'll follow up with all of them, and that will be much more beneficial.
So those are a lot of helpful tips. And, as you've been chatting, Bonnie, we have had a few questions
Good.
and comments coming into the chat. And I want to say I really love the way that some of you are using the chat as a place to network and offer support and help to each other for those who are searching for jobs. So I wanted to say that for part of our daily connection series, this is a special event today with Bonnie, but we've been doing this daily webinar series. We do have a Facebook group that's open to anyone, and I'm going to ask Kelly to put the link to that group in the chat, because if you'd like to continue some of your conversations from today with people who are a part of these opportunities for free webinars, that would be a place that you can all connect with each other, with me. And Bonnie, I'm sure that you'd be willing to connect with folks on LinkedIn. So as long as we're talking about that, please feel free to connect with Bonnie on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. And Kelly, if you're able to work fast, maybe you can put those links in the chat as well. And I would request, if you send me a connection request, just send a note to tell me, that you are at the webinar, so I know to connect with you. I'm sure Bonnie would appreciate that as well. I'm always willing to connect if people let me know how and why they're asking. So Michelle is wondering though, Bonnie, and I bet you have a great point of view on this, how we can provide the same warm and fuzzy experience virtually that we try to do when we connect with people in person.
I think that this kind of format is pretty intimate. There aren't as many distractions, especially when you're doing this like one-on-one. And even if you're doing it in a small group, this vehicle, this technology allows you to connect with the person who's speaking at that time. And I think the challenge is to give the same kind of eye contact, to listen well, to ask good questions, to show that you're interested, and respond in kind. I think that you can make it work if you use the same kind of skills that you would if you were having a coffee with somebody. And in some cases, this may be even a better opportunity.
Yeah, why do you say that, Bonnie? Say more about that.
Well, I think that the technology makes it easy. The technology allows you to focus one-on-one, and it depends on what's going on in your house. You just had to go by, but there could be kids, there could be whatever. Try to find, if you're making these connections, try to find a quiet space, just like you would a quiet place to have coffee, perhaps.
But turn your camera on, right?
Oh yeah, if you know somebody, and it's funny because I've had people say to me, well, you just said to me yesterday, are you dressing up for this call? And I've had people say to me, well, I'm going to wear makeup, I just want to let you know. So anyway, but I think it is a great opportunity to zoom in and make these connections if we use the technology right. If it's somebody new, show a genuine interest in. I mean, we do have this common situation that we're dealing with, common experience, and you can always use that as a launching pad. But show an interest and ask good questions, and maybe you want to write out some questions ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. There was a question earlier actually in the chat from Erica, who I've been noticing on a lot of our events, and she was wondering how you come up with good questions. Bonnie, do you have, any, secret stash of questions that you return to as a coach or, in your networking efforts?
I don't really, except to say that my questions would always start with an interest in what's happening with that other person.
Mhm.
Where are you at right now? And I don't mean physically. You know, what's going on with you? You know, what are some of the challenges that you have right now? You know, what is what have you learned about yourself? I put that out on Facebook. What have you learned about yourself, the good, bad, and ugly, you know,
Mhm.
through this thing? But asking questions that really start with making that personal one-on-one kind of connection, that you're interested in them, not
Mhm.
just as a vehicle for your career, but you're interested in knowing, because the questions kind of flow ahead of time. You can start out with kind of a general one, like, you know, how you doing with all this? You know,
Mhm.
and how's work going? And what are some of your challenges? And then get into what some of your challenges are and what some of your interests are and where you want to take your career. And maybe it's questions, depending on who the person is, about how did you get to be COO? You know, I'd love to know more about your career. So it's these kinds of things that I think when you ask questions um, that way and you allow people to talk about themselves, they open up, because people usually love to talk about themselves. And so that's true whether you're networking virtually or, you know, face to face. Make sure you ask the kinds of questions where people will open up
That's
and
really
feel a lot more about who they are.
That's helpful, Bonnie. Thank you. So as we come closer to the end of the hour today, we want to make sure that we're answering the questions that you most want to have answered about strategic networking. And the chat has been going so fast today. So if there's a question that you asked earlier that I did not get to, and you'd like to go and you know, copy paste it and give it to me again to bring it back to the bottom of the chat, I would welcome you to do so. Michelle does have quite a few questions here, you know, related to I'm not sure, Michelle, the question about being focused and organized. So are you wondering how to keep a virtual meeting focused and organized? If so, if you could clarify. Let me think. And Jane is pointing to another resource, Leading with Questions. There is a blog out there called Leading with Questions, and the author of that blog has lots and lots of good questions. In fact, I keep them saved in my email on my phone, so that if I run out of topics for my kids at the dinner table, I bring up his blog post to get questions to ask my kids. A true story. Wow, lots in the chat here. Let's see. So Michelle's wondering how to create more connection with a larger group virtually, and potentially how to be more effective in networking if you're in a large group meeting that's virtual. Hopefully that.
So I'm not sure I got the question. How to make the connections in a virtual meeting?
If it's a larger meeting, how to stay focused in a larger group meeting that's virtual to help people feel included and connected.
I guess I wonder, large, are we talking hundreds?
She said 25.
Oh, 25. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the best way is to take notes. To if somebody says something, even if they're on the screen or they're not, well, they would be for a moment if they're on Zoom. Just make a note of who said it and kind of what they said. And that's always a good opening to then connect with them after the meeting. So I'm not sure that I'm clear on the question, but that would be my response. Even if they're 25 people, I would just kind of, have one hand on a notebook and make some points. It doesn't mean that all 25, every single time you get together, you're going to have something but even if you just come up with a couple
Mm-hmm.
at each meeting, so that you can follow up and make a connection. And that's the beginning of a conversation. It's not a one-off.
Sure.
It's like, I really appreciated your idea on this. But I've been thinking about that. What do you think about this idea? Or just keep it going. Or I read an article about that the other day. I can send you the link if you want. So keep it going and keep building the relationship.
Sure, that's really helpful. And one thing that occurs to me, Bonnie, I don't know if you've ever tried this out, but in using Zoom meetings, one of the things that I really enjoy is the breakout rooms. And so sometimes if you're in a Zoom meeting and you have 25 people, if you can let people go out into smaller groups to talk with one another, that can create a more intimate environment. I don't know if you've tried out that technology, go ahead and tell me in the chat. I don't know. Bonnie, have you tried it?
No.
No, it's fun. We should do it. We should do it. So before we wrap up today, we do have a few interesting offers for you. One of the things that we want to do is remind you that all of Bonnie's great insights about strategic networking are in her book, The Politics of Promotion, How to Get Ahead and Stay Ahead. You also can hear some amazing conversations that Bonnie has had on her podcast, Badass Women at Any Age, and we would invite you to subscribe, download, rate, all the things that you can do with podcasts. And then the third thing is that Bonnie has offered to make herself available in the spirit of helpfulness for a 2-hour open office hours on Zoom this Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Pacific time. And Kelly is going to put Pacific. Sorry, what
No,
did I say?
no, I just, if you're on Eastern, I'm not going to be on there at 7 a.m.
Oh, right. So Pacific time. Bonnie is in California. So 10 a.m. Pacific to noon Pacific on Friday. Kelly has put that link in the chat, but don't worry if you don't catch it from the chat. We will also put it in our follow-up email. And so you might be curious, what does open office hours mean? Well, Bonnie is going to open her Zoom link and she will be sitting, working, and if you show up, you can ask her any question and talk about any topic. And you might show up when someone else is there. You might show up when you're the only one there. But this is an open invitation to network with Bonnie during this 2-hour window on Friday. I might show up.
Get any questions that you didn't get answered today, or you didn't feel comfortable asking, you can certainly reach out to me on Friday, or you can email me, Bonnie@BonnieMarcusLeadership.com.
And Kelly has that in the chat for us as well. So all the links are in the chat, along with a lot of people who love your podcast, apparently, Bonnie. So lots of fans on the call. So thank you so much to all of you who have joined us today. We will have another webinar with Bonnie in the series coming up, I think, in May. I don't know if we have that one scheduled or not, but we'll be in touch with you about that. And grateful, Bonnie, for your insights and wisdom today.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.